Elena had been at the castle for 3 weeks when Mrs. Blackwood came to her room with news that made her stomach feel sick. "Tomorrow is your wedding day," the older woman said. "The Duke has invited several important lords to witness the ceremony. They will arrive this afternoon." Elena sat down hard in her chair. She had been so focused on getting through each day that she had almost forgotten why she was really here, almost forgotten that being the Duke's wife meant more than just living in his castle and eating dinner with him. "So soon?" Elena asked. "The Duke does not like to wait once he has made up his mind about something," Mrs. Blackwood said. "Sarah will help you prepare. Your wedding dress is being brought up now." The wedding dress was the most beautiful thing Elena had ever seen. It was made of white silk that seemed to glow like moonlight, with tiny pearls sewn all over it that caught the light when she moved. But when Elena looked at it, all she could think about was putting on chains made of silk and pearls. "It is lovely," Sarah said as she helped Elena try it on. "You will be the most beautiful bride anyone has ever seen." Elena looked at herself in the mirror. The dress fit perfectly, like everything else the Duke had chosen for her. She did look beautiful, but she felt like she was looking at a stranger. The girl in the mirror looked like a duchess, but Elena still felt like a scared young woman who had been sold for a horse. That afternoon, the wedding guests arrived. Elena watched from her window as they rode into the courtyard. There were 5 lords, all older men with serious faces and expensive clothes. They had brought their own servants and soldiers, so the usually quiet castle was suddenly full of noise and activity. Elena had hoped that having guests might make the Duke more friendly, but when she saw him greeting the lords in the courtyard, he looked just as cold and stern as always. He shook hands with each man and spoke to them in his quiet, serious voice. Even when one of the lords laughed at something, the Duke did not smile. That evening there was a dinner for the wedding guests. Elena wore one of her finest dresses and sat beside the Duke at the long table. The lords talked about politics and land and money, but none of them spoke directly to Elena. It was like she was not really there, just a piece of furniture that happened to be sitting in a chair. "So, Aldrich," one of the lords said, "you finally decided to marry again. It has been, 5 years since Isabel died?" Elena felt the Duke go very still beside her. When he answered, his voice was even colder than usual. 6 years. "Well, it is time you had sons to carry on your name," another lord said. "This girl looks young and strong. She should give you healthy children." Elena felt her face burn. They were talking about her like she was a horse being bred, not a person with feelings. "She is very pretty," the first lord said, looking at Elena for the first time all evening. "Much prettier than I expected from such a small estate." "You made a good bargain, Aldrich." A bargain. That was all she was to these men. Something bought and paid for. Elena looked at the Duke to see if he would say anything to defend her, but he just cut his meat and acted like he had not heard. The conversation moved on to other things, and Elena sat in silence for the rest of the meal, feeling smaller and more invisible with each passing minute. After dinner, Mrs. Blackwood took Elena back to her room. "You should rest," the older woman said. "Tomorrow will be a long day." But Elena could not sleep. She sat by her window looking out at the dark mountains and thinking about tomorrow. In less than 24 hours she would be married to a man who barely spoke to her. And after that, Elena tried not to think about what would happen after that. She had heard other women talk about wedding nights in whispers when they thought she was not listening. She knew what husbands expected from their wives. The thought made her afraid and embarrassed and sad all at the same time. The wedding day dawned gray and cloudy, which seemed right to Elena. Sarah woke her early to help her get ready. The girl chattered nervously as she helped Elena bathe and dress. "You look like a princess from a fairy tale," Sarah said as she arranged Elena's hair. "The Duke will be so proud to have such a beautiful wife." Elena wondered if the Duke would feel anything at all when he looked at her. So far, he had shown about as much emotion as one of the stone statues in his courtyard. The wedding ceremony was held in the castle's chapel, a small stone room with tall windows and an altar covered in white flowers. Elena walked down the short aisle alone, with no father to give her away. The Duke waited for her at the altar, dressed in dark blue velvet that made him look more handsome than she had seen him before, but no less cold. The priest spoke the old words about love and honor and faithfulness. Elena and the Duke repeated the vows they were supposed to say. When the priest told the Duke to kiss his bride, he gave Elena a quick, cold kiss that felt more like a duty than anything else. "You are now man and wife," the priest said. The lords clapped politely. Mrs. Blackwood and some of the other servants watched from the back of the chapel. And that was it. Elena was married to a stranger who had bought her for a horse. There was a wedding feast after the ceremony, but it was not very different from the dinner the night before. The same lords sat around the same table and talked about the same boring things. Elena sat beside her new husband and picked at her food, while the men around her drank wine and acted like she was not there. The only difference was that now some of the lords made jokes about marriage and babies that made Elena want to hide under the table. The Duke did not laugh at any of the jokes, but he did not stop them either. As the afternoon went on, Elena began to feel more and more nervous about what would happen when the guests left. Several times she caught the Duke looking at her with an expression she could not read. Was he thinking about tonight too? Did he feel anything about having a wife, or was she just another piece of property to him? Finally, as the sun was setting, the wedding guests began to leave. They thanked the Duke for his hospitality and congratulated him on his marriage. One of them winked at him and said something about hoping for good news about an heir soon. The Duke just nodded and shook the man's hand. Elena stood beside her husband and said goodbye to men she barely knew, men who would probably never think about her again after today. When the last horse disappeared down the mountain road, the castle fell back into its usual quiet. "Well," the Duke said, turning to Elena, "it is done. It is done. Not 'we are married' or 'I am happy' or anything that sounded like he had feelings about what had just happened. Just 'it is done,' like he had finished an unpleasant task." Elena did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. "I have some work to do in my study," the Duke said. "You should rest." He walked away, leaving Elena standing alone in the courtyard as the darkness settled around the castle. Elena went back to her room, where Sarah was waiting to help her out of her wedding dress. The beautiful gown felt heavy now, like it was made of lead instead of silk. "Was it a lovely ceremony, my lady?" Sarah asked. "Yes," Elena lied. "Very lovely." Sarah helped Elena change into a white nightgown that Mrs. Blackwood had left for her. It was made of fine cotton with lace around the neck and sleeves. Elena had never owned anything so delicate. "Should I fix your hair, my lady?" Sarah asked. Elena looked at herself in the mirror. Her hair was still arranged in the complicated style Sarah had created for the wedding, with flowers woven through it. It looked pretty, but it felt wrong somehow, like she was still pretending to be someone else. "Take it down," Elena said. "Just brush it out and leave it loose." Sarah looked surprised, but did as she was told. When she was finished, Elena looked more like herself again, though the fancy nightgown still made her feel like she was playing dress-up. "Will there be anything else, my lady?" Sarah asked. "No. Thank you, Sarah. You can go to bed now." After Sarah left, Elena sat in her chair by the window and waited. The castle was very quiet. She could hear the wind blowing around the stone walls and the sound of her own heartbeat, but nothing else. Hours passed. Elena's eyes got heavy and her neck hurt from sitting up straight for so long. She began to wonder if the Duke was coming at all. Maybe he had forgotten about her. Maybe he was planning to leave her alone tonight and every other night. She was not sure if that idea made her feel relieved or hurt. Finally, Elena could not stay awake any longer. She climbed into the big bed and pulled the covers up to her chin. The bed was soft and warm, but she felt very small in it. She lay there listening to the quiet and wondering what kind of marriage this was going to be. She must have fallen asleep, because the next thing she knew, it was morning. Sunlight was coming through her window and she could hear birds singing outside. Elena sat up in bed and looked around. She was still alone. The Duke had never come to her room. She was still wearing the white nightgown. The flowers from her wedding hair were scattered on the pillow beside her. And she was still, in every way that mattered, exactly the same person she had been before her wedding day. Elena did not know what to think about that. Was she relieved? Disappointed? Confused? All of those things at once? A little while later, Sarah came in with breakfast and a worried look on her face. "Good morning, my lady. Did you sleep well?" 2 months passed after Elena's wedding, and her life settled into a strange pattern. She woke each morning in her beautiful room, ate breakfast alone, spent her days reading in the library or walking in the garden, ate dinner with a husband who barely spoke to her, and went to bed alone. It was like being married to a ghost. Elena tried to understand the Duke, but he remained a mystery to her. She watched him from her window sometimes as he trained with his men in the courtyard. He was a skilled fighter, quick and strong, and his men respected him. But even when he was teaching them new sword moves or planning their training, he never smiled or laughed. He was all business all the time. She also noticed that he spent many hours alone in his study, reading papers and writing letters. Sometimes she heard him pacing back and forth in there late at night, his boots making soft sounds on the stone floor above her room. What did he think about during those long, quiet hours? What made him walk back and forth like a caged animal? Elena had explored most of the castle by now, or at least the parts that were not locked. She had found rooms full of old furniture covered with white sheets, rooms that looked like they had been beautiful once but were now just empty and sad. She had found a music room with a piano that no one had played in years. When she pressed one of the keys, it made a lonely sound that echoed through the whole room. "Why are so many rooms locked?" Elena asked Thomas one day. He was one of the few servants who would really talk to her, probably because he was too old to be afraid of losing his job. "The Duke had them locked after Lady Isabel died," Thomas said. He looked around to make sure no one else was listening. He said there was no point in keeping rooms open that no one would use. What were they used for before? Oh, many things. Lady Isabel loved to entertain. There was a ballroom where they held dances, a sitting room where the ladies would have tea and talk, a nursery that she was preparing for. Thomas stopped talking and looked sad. For the baby? Yes. She spent months getting that room ready. She painted flowers on the walls herself and chose every piece of furniture. She was so excited to be a mother. Thomas wiped his eyes with his sleeve. After she died, the Duke locked that room and threw away the key. Said he never wanted to see it again. Elena felt a pain in her chest when she heard this. She tried to imagine how the Duke must have felt, losing both his wife and his child. No wonder he had built walls around his heart. But understanding his pain did not make her own life any less lonely. One evening, Elena was walking through the castle after dinner when she heard something strange. It sounded like someone talking, but she could not make out the words. The sound was coming from somewhere above her, from one of the tall towers she had never been able to reach. Elena followed the sound up a narrow stone staircase she had not noticed before. The steps were old and worn smooth by many feet over many years. As she climbed higher, the voice became clearer. It was a man's voice, low and soft, speaking words she could almost understand. At the top of the stairs was a wooden door that was slightly open. Elena could see light coming from inside the room. She knew she should not look, knew she was probably going somewhere she was not supposed to be. But curiosity was stronger than good sense. Very carefully, Elena pushed the door open just enough to see inside. The room was not very big, but it was warm and comfortable in a way that the rest of the castle was not. There were books on shelves, papers on a desk, and a fire burning in a small fireplace. And there, standing with his back to the door, was the Duke. He was looking at a painting on the wall and talking to it in a voice Elena had never heard him use before. It was gentle and sad and full of feeling. "I brought her here today," he was saying. "The girl, Elena. I know you would have liked her. She tries to talk to me at dinner, asks me questions about the castle and the land. She is curious about everything, the way you were." Elena's heart began to beat faster. The girl, he was talking about her. "I do not know what to do with her," the Duke continued. I thought having someone else here would make the loneliness less. But it only makes me miss you more. She sits in your chair at dinner, sleeps in rooms near where you used to sleep, and every time I see her I remember that you are not here." Elena leaned closer to see the painting he was talking to. It showed a young woman with dark hair and kind eyes wearing a blue dress. She was beautiful, but more than that, she looked warm and alive and happy. This had to be Isabel, the Duke's first wife. "I know I am not being fair to her," the Duke said to the painting. "She did not choose this life. Her father sold her to me like a piece of property, and now she is trapped here with a man who cannot give her what she needs. But I do not know how to be a real husband again. I do not know how to let someone close enough to hurt me the way you did when you left." Elena put her hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound. She had never heard the Duke speak with such emotion about anything. His voice was full of pain and regret, and a loneliness that matched her own. "Sometimes I think I should let her go," the Duke said. "Give her money and send her somewhere she could find a man who would really love her. But then I remember how empty this place was before she came, and I am too selfish to do the right thing." Elena felt tears start to run down her face. She had thought the Duke did not care about her at all, that she meant nothing to him. But listening to him now, she realized that she did mean something to him. Not the same thing she had meant to her father, who loved her for herself, but something. He noticed her. He thought about her. He worried about whether he was treating her fairly. It was not love, but it was not complete indifference either. "I see her watching me sometimes," the Duke said. "From her window when I am training with the men or from across the table at dinner. I think she is trying to understand me. But how can I explain that I am afraid? How can I tell her that everyone I have ever loved has been taken away from me? And I cannot bear to love someone again only to lose them." Elena understood then why the Duke kept his distance from her. It was not because he did not like her, or because he thought she was not worth caring about. It was because he was afraid that if he let himself care about her, something bad would happen to her too. "I dream about you sometimes," the Duke said to the painting. "I dream that you are still here, that we are still planning for our child to be born, that we are still happy. And then I wake up and remember that you are gone, and I have to start each day knowing that I will never see you again." Elena's heart broke for him. She had lost people too. Her mother had died when Elena was young, and now she had lost her father and Margaret and her old life. But she had never lost someone the way the Duke had lost Isabel. She had never had love and then had it torn away. "I should try harder with Elena," the Duke said. "She deserves better than a husband who acts like she does not exist. But every time I think about opening my heart again, I remember how much it hurt when yours stopped beating, and I think I would rather be lonely than go through that pain again." Elena knew she should leave. She was hearing things that were private, things the Duke would never want her to know, but she could not make herself move. This was the first time she had heard him speak with real feeling about anything, and she wanted to understand this man who was her husband but felt like a stranger. "Maybe someday I will be brave enough to let her in," the Duke said. "Maybe someday I will be strong enough to risk loving someone again. But not today. Today I am still too much of a coward." Elena finally made herself step back from the door. She had heard enough. Moving as quietly as she could, she went back down the stone steps and through the castle to her own room. Once she was safely behind her own door, Elena sat down in her chair and thought about what she had heard. Everything made sense now. The Duke's coldness, his distance, the way he looked at her sometimes like she was a problem he did not know how to solve. He was not cruel or mean. He was just afraid. And suddenly Elena did not feel quite so alone anymore. Yes, the Duke was not the husband she had dreamed of having, but he was not the cold, heartless man she had thought he was either. He was just a person who had been hurt so badly that he was afraid to let anyone close enough to hurt him again. Elena did not know what to do with this new understanding. She could not tell the Duke that she had been listening to his private thoughts. She could not suddenly start acting like she knew things about him that he had never told her. But maybe, just maybe, she could start being patient with him in a new way. Maybe she could stop waiting for him to become the husband she wanted and start trying to understand the husband she had. It was not the same as being loved, but it was something. It was a beginning. That night, for the first time since coming to the castle, Elena did not cry herself to sleep. Instead, she lay in her bed and thought about the man in the tower, talking to a painting of his lost love, and she felt something she had not felt in a long time. She felt hope. Maybe their marriage would never be a great love story. Maybe the Duke would never look at her the way he had looked at Isabel. But maybe, if she was patient and kind and understanding, they could find some small happiness together. Maybe loneliness shared was better than loneliness faced alone. And maybe, just maybe, two broken hearts could heal faster when they were healing together. Winter came early to the mountains that year. Snow began falling in November and did not stop for days. The wind howled around the castle walls like a wild animal, and the cold crept through the stone like icy fingers. Elena had never lived through such a harsh winter, but the cold outside was nothing compared to the news that came with it. Thomas found Elena in the library one gray afternoon, his old face creased with worry. "My lady," he said, "there is sickness in the village. The fever has come again." Elena looked up from her book. "The fever? It comes every few years," Thomas explained. "It starts with one family and spreads to others. People get very hot, then very cold. Some get better, but others—" He shook his head. "The old and the young suffer the most." Elena felt her heart sink. She remembered her mother dying of a fever when Elena was small. She remembered how helpless everyone had felt, watching someone they loved slip away and being unable to do anything about it. What does the Duke do when this happens? Elena asked. He sends Dr. Morrison, the castle physician, to help where he can, and he sends food and blankets to the families who need them. But he stays here in the castle. He says a lord's duty is to protect his people, not to put himself at risk. Elena thought about this. The Duke's first duty might be to stay safe, but Elena was not the Duke. She was just his wife, and maybe she could do things he could not. Thomas, Elena said, will you take me to see Dr. Morrison? My lady? I want to help. I want to go to the village and help take care of the sick people. Thomas looked shocked. Oh no, my lady. The Duke would never allow it. It is too dangerous. You could catch the fever yourself. Then we will not tell the Duke until after I have already gone, Elena said. She found Dr. Morrison in his rooms, preparing medicines and looking very tired. He was a small, round man with kind eyes and gentle hands. When Elena told him she wanted to help in the village, he looked as shocked as Thomas had. My lady, I cannot let you risk your health, he said. The Duke would have my head if anything happened to you. Dr. Morrison, Elena said, I have seen fever before. I helped take care of my mother when she was sick. I am not afraid of hard work or of being around sick people, and you need help, do you not? The doctor looked at his bags of medicine and supplies. I do need help, he admitted. There are more sick people than I can handle alone. But the Duke is not here, Elena said. And the people in the village need us now. We can worry about what the Duke thinks later. Dr. Morrison looked at Elena for a long moment. Then he nodded. Very well, but you must do exactly what I tell you to do. And if you start to feel sick at all, you must come back to the castle immediately. Elena agreed. She went back to her room and changed into her warmest, plainest dress. She told Sarah she was going for a ride and might be gone for several hours. Then she met Dr. Morrison at the stables, where he was loading a cart with medicines and supplies. The village was only a few miles from the castle, but the snow made the trip slow and difficult. When they arrived, Elena saw a place very different from the neat, prosperous farms she had imagined. The houses were small and poor, with thin walls and roofs that looked like they leaked. Smoke rose from some chimneys, but others were cold and dark. The fever hit the Hartwell family first, Dr. Morrison explained as they stopped in front of a tiny house. Both parents and 3 children. The baby died yesterday. Elena felt sick, but not from any fever. The thought of a baby dying while she had been sitting comfortably in the castle reading books made her feel ashamed of her easy life. Inside the house, Elena saw poverty like she had never imagined. The Hartwell family had almost nothing. A few pieces of broken furniture, thin blankets, no food that she could see. The mother lay on a narrow bed, burning with fever and calling out for her dead baby. The father sat beside her, too weak to stand. 2 small children huddled together in a corner, their eyes big and scared. Elena had seen sickness before, but she had never seen sickness mixed with such terrible poverty. At her father's house, even when times were hard, they had always had enough food and warm clothes and comfortable beds. These people had been struggling to survive even before the fever came. What can I do? Elena asked Dr. Morrison. Help me cool the mother's fever, he said. We need to get her temperature down. For the next several hours, Elena worked harder than she had ever worked in her life. She carried water from the well. Even though her hands were so cold they felt like they might break. She helped Dr. Morrison give medicine to the sick family members. She cleaned up messes and washed dirty clothes and fed thin soup to people too weak to feed themselves. It was hard, tiring work, but Elena found that she was good at it. Her hands were gentle when she touched fevered foreheads. Her voice was calm when she spoke to scared children. And she was not afraid of the sickness or the smell or the sadness. Most importantly, she could see that her help was needed. Dr. Morrison could not be everywhere at once, and there were things Elena could do that made a real difference. She could hold a sick child while the doctor treated the parents. She could cook soup and feed it to people too weak to eat. She could clean houses and wash clothes and simply be there so people did not have to face the sickness alone. They went to 5 different houses that day. In each one, Elena saw the same thing. Families struggling not just with fever, but with hunger and cold and poverty. She saw children wearing clothes that were too small and full of holes. She saw parents who looked like they had not eaten a good meal in weeks. By the time they returned to the castle, it was dark and Elena was exhausted. Her dress was dirty, her hair was messy, and her hands were red and rough from the cold water. But she felt more useful than she had since coming to live at the castle. You did good work today, Dr. Morrison told her as they put away the medical supplies. Those people needed help and you gave it to them. I want to go back tomorrow, Elena said. My lady, I think you should rest tomorrow. And I think you should tell the Duke what you did today. He will not be happy that you went to the village without his permission. Elena knew Dr. Morrison was right. She had to tell the Duke what she had done. But she was not looking forward to it. She cleaned up as best she could and went to dinner, arriving a few minutes late. The Duke was already sitting at his end of the long table, and he looked up when she came in. You are late, he said. Yes, Elena said. I was working. The Duke looked at her more carefully. Elena knew she still looked messy, even though she had tried to fix her hair and wash her hands. Working? The Duke said. What kind of work? Elena took a deep breath. I went to the village today to help Dr. Morrison take care of the people who have the fever. The Duke's face went very still. You did what? The village people are very sick, Elena said. Dr. Morrison needed help and You went to the village. The Duke's voice was quiet, but Elena could hear anger in it. You exposed yourself to fever. You put yourself in danger. Without asking me, without even telling me. Yes, Elena said. She lifted her chin and looked directly at him. I did. The Duke stood up from his chair. Elena had never seen him look so angry. How dare you, he said. How dare you risk your health and safety without my permission? You are my wife. Your life is not your own to throw away. I did not throw my life away, Elena said. She was getting angry, too. I helped people who needed help. I did useful work for the first time since I came to this castle. Useful work? The Duke's voice was louder now. You call risking your life for a bunch of peasants useful work? Those peasants are your people, Elena said, standing up to face him. They live on your land. They depend on you to take care of them, and they are dying while you sit safe in your castle. The Duke's eyes flashed with anger. I send them food. I send them a doctor. I do my duty to them. Your duty? Elena felt all the loneliness and frustration of the past months boiling up inside her. What about your duty to me? What about treating me like a wife instead of like a piece of furniture you bought and put in a room? The Duke stepped back like she had hit him. What are you talking about? I am talking about the fact that you ignore me every day, Elena said. The words poured out of her like water from a broken dam. I am talking about the fact that you act like I do not exist except when you have to eat dinner with me. I am talking about the fact that I have been here for months and you have never once asked me what I think, or how I feel, or what I want. The Duke stared at her. I have given you everything you need. You have fine clothes, good food, a beautiful room. I do not care about fine clothes. Elena shouted. I care about having a purpose. I care about doing something that matters. And today, for the first time since I came here, I felt like my life had meaning. They stood there looking at each other across the long table. Elena was breathing hard and her heart was beating fast. She had never spoken to anyone like that before, especially not to the Duke. But she was glad she had said it. She was tired of being quiet and polite and invisible. The Duke's anger seemed to drain away and he looked confused and hurt. I thought you were happy here. Happy? Elena almost laughed, but it would not have been a happy laugh. How could I be happy? I live in a castle with a husband who barely speaks to me. I have servants who are afraid to be my friends. I have nothing to do all day except read books and walk around empty rooms. I feel like a ghost haunting a place where I do not belong. The Duke sat down heavily in his chair. He looked older than Elena had ever seen him look. I did not know, he said quietly. You did not ask, Elena said. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then the Duke looked up at her. Tell me about today, he said. Tell me what you did in the village. Elena was surprised by the change in his voice. The anger was gone and he sounded like he really wanted to know. So she told him. She told him about the Hartwell family and the baby who had died. She told him about the poverty she had seen, the hunger and cold that made the fever so much worse. She told him about the children who were scared and the parents who were too weak to take care of their families. The Duke listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. I did not know it was so bad, he said finally. It is very bad, Elena said, and it will get worse if we do not help them. We? Elena looked at him steadily. I'm going back tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day until the fever is gone and those people are well again. You can forbid me to go if you want to, But I will go anyway. The Duke studied her face. Even if I lock you in your room? Then I will find a way to unlock it. For the first time since Elena had known him, the Duke almost smiled. It was just a tiny change around his eyes, but she saw it. You are more stubborn than I thought, he said. Yes, Elena said. I am. The Duke was quiet for another long moment. Then he said something that surprised her. I will come with you tomorrow. What? You are right, the Duke said. They are my people, and if my wife is going to risk her life to help them, then their lord should be there too. Elena stared at him. This was not what she had expected. But you said it was too dangerous, she said. It is dangerous, the Duke said. For both of us. But some things are worth the risk. The next morning, Elena and the Duke rode to the village together with Dr. Morrison and a cart full of supplies. Elena had never seen the Duke outside his castle except when he was training with his men. She had never seen him around common people. But as she watched him that day, she began to see a different side of her husband. He was gentle with the sick children, patient with the frightened parents, and generous with his money and supplies. He did not act like a great lord doing charity work. He acted like a man who genuinely cared about helping people who were suffering. Working side by side with the Duke, Elena began to understand him in a new way. He was still quiet and serious, but she could see that his seriousness came from caring deeply about doing things right. He was still distant with her, but she could see that he was distant with everyone. It was not personal, it was just his way. And slowly, as the day went on, the ice between them began to thaw just a little. It was not love, not yet. But it was the beginning of something that might someday become love. It was the beginning of understanding. The fever lasted 3 weeks. For 3 weeks, Elena and the Duke worked together in the village every day, helping Dr. Morrison care for the sick, and making sure the healthy families had enough food and firewood to survive the harsh winter. It was hard work that left them both exhausted every evening, but it changed everything between them. The first change Elena noticed was that the Duke began talking to her. Not just the polite, distant words he had used before, but real conversation. As they rode to the village each morning, he told her about the people they would be helping that day. He explained which families had been on his land the longest, which children were the smartest, which men were the best workers. The Hartwell family has lived here for 4 generations, he said one morning as they rode through the snow. John Hartwell's great-grandfather helped my grandfather build the stone wall around the north field. They are good people who have had bad luck. What kind of bad luck? Helena asked. John hurt his back in a farming accident 2 years ago. He cannot do heavy work anymore, so the family has struggled to grow enough food. Then their roof started leaking, but they could not afford to fix it. And now this fever. The Duke shook his head. Sometimes it seems like life is determined to beat some people down no matter how hard they try. Elena was surprised to hear such feeling in his voice. But you will help them, will you not? After the fever is gone? Yes, the Duke said. I will make sure John has lighter work that will not hurt his back, and I will have someone fix their roof before next winter. Elena felt something warm grow in her chest. This was the man she had been hoping to find underneath all that coldness. The second change was that they began eating dinner together in a new way. Instead of sitting at opposite ends of the long table in uncomfortable silence, the Duke had the servants set up a smaller table near the fireplace in his study. They sat across from each other and talked about their day in the village, about the people they had helped, about what still needed to be done. Mrs. Patterson's baby is getting stronger, Elena said one evening. She was able to drink some milk today without throwing it up. That is good news, the Duke said. And young Tom Morrison is sitting up on his own now. Dr. Morrison thinks he will make a full recovery. These dinners became the best part of Elena's day. For the first time since coming to the castle, she felt like she had a real partner, someone who shared her concerns and understood the work she was doing. The third change was the most surprising of all. The Duke began to smile. It happened slowly, just small moments at first. A tiny smile when a sick child laughed at something Elena said. A slightly bigger smile when an elderly man recovered enough to joke with them. And one day, when Elena slipped in the snow and landed in a pile of white powder with her skirts over her head, the Duke actually laughed out loud. Elena looked up at him from the snowbank, brushing ice out of her hair, and saw her husband really laugh for the first time. It changed his whole face, made him look years younger, and Elena felt her heart skip a beat. You find my misfortune amusing? She asked, trying to sound stern but smiling herself. I find your courage amusing, the Duke said, reaching down to help her up. Most ladies would be screaming about their ruined dress. You are worried about whether you dropped the medicine. Elena looked down at her hands. She was indeed still holding the bottle of medicine she had been carrying. Well, this medicine is more important than my dress. Yes, the Duke said, and his voice was serious again. It is. But the smile stayed in his eyes for the rest of the day. By the end of the 3 weeks, the fever had broken in most of the village families. Dr. Morrison said the worst was over, and Elena and the Duke could return to their normal life at the castle. But when they got back to the castle that last evening, Elena realized she did not want to return to their old life. She had gotten used to working beside the Duke, talking with him, feeling like they were partners in something important. The thought of going back to silent dinners and empty days made her feel sad. The Duke seemed to feel the same way. At dinner that night, he was quieter than he had been in weeks. Is everything all right? Elena asked. I was thinking about tomorrow, the Duke said, about what we will do now that our work in the village is finished. I suppose we go back to the way things were before, Elena said, though she hoped he would say no. Do you want that? The Duke asked. Elena looked at him carefully. His face was serious, but she could see something hopeful in his eyes. No, she said honestly. I do not want that at all. Neither do I, the Duke said. They looked at each other across the small table, and Elena felt something important happening between them. Aldrich, she said, using his name for the first time. What do you want? The Duke, Aldrich, was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft and uncertain. I want to keep talking to you, he said. I want to keep working together. I want to try to be a real husband to you. Elena's heart began to beat faster. What does that mean? I do not know, Aldrich said honestly. I have been alone for so long I have forgotten how to be close to someone. But these past weeks working beside you, seeing how brave and kind and strong you are, I want to learn how to do this right. Elena felt tears start in her eyes, but they were happy tears. I want that too, she said. Winter deepened, but the coldness between Elena and Aldrich continued to thaw. They began spending their evenings together in his study, reading books or talking about plans for improving life in the village. Sometimes they played chess, and Elena discovered that Aldrich had a dry sense of humor that made her laugh. They also began taking long walks through the castle together. Aldrich showed Elena rooms she had never seen before, and told her stories about his family and his childhood. He showed her portraits of his parents and grandparents, and Elena began to understand the long history of the family she had married into. One snowy afternoon, Aldrich took Elena to the highest tower of the castle, the same tower where she had heard him talking to Isabel's portrait months before. But this time he brought her there on purpose. There is something I want to show you, he said as they climbed the narrow stairs. In the tower room, the portrait of Isabel still hung on the wall. But now Aldrich looked at it without the desperate sadness Elena had seen before. She was beautiful, Elena said. Yes, Aldrich said. And kind. And funny. And she loved this castle and these people as much as I do. Elena waited for him to say more. I loved her very much, Aldrich said. I thought I would never love anyone again after she died. I thought my heart was too broken to ever heal. And now? Elena asked quietly. Aldrich turned to look at her. Now I think maybe I was wrong. Maybe hearts can heal if they are given enough time and patience and love. Elena felt her breath catch in her throat. Elena, Aldrich said, I need to tell you something. When I married you, I thought I was just buying a wife to give me sons and run my household. I thought you would be convenient, useful. I did not expect to care about you. And do you? Elena asked. Care about me? Yes, Aldrich said simply. I do. More than I thought possible. Elena felt warmth spread through her chest like sunshine. But I need you to know, Aldrich continued, that I will never love you the way I loved Isabel. That love was everything to me. It was the sun and the moon and the stars. What I feel for you is different. Elena felt a small stab of disappointment, but she tried not to show it. What do you feel for me? She asked. Aldrich thought for a moment. Respect, he said, and admiration, and gratitude, and a kind of fondness that grows stronger every day. It is not the wild, desperate love I had for Isabel, but it is real, and it is enough to build a life on. Elena looked at the portrait of Isabel, then back at Aldrich. Is it enough for you? He asked. A marriage based on respect and partnership and growing affection rather than great passion? Elena thought about this carefully. She had dreamed of a great love story when she was younger. She had imagined a husband who would love her the way heroes loved heroines in the books she read. But she had also learned something important in the past few months. She had learned that there were different kinds of love, and she had learned that a marriage built on friendship and shared values and mutual respect might actually be stronger than one built only on passion. Yes, she said, it is enough for me. Aldrich smiled, and it was the warmest smile Elena had ever seen from him. Good, he said, because I have something to ask you. Elena waited. Elena, Aldrich said, will you marry me? Elena laughed. We are already married. No, Aldrich said seriously. We had a wedding, but we were strangers then. I want to marry you now when we actually know each other. I want to marry you because I choose you, not because your father sold you to me. Elena felt tears start in her eyes again. I want to marry you because you are brave enough to risk your life for people you barely know, Aldrich continued. Because you are smart enough to see solutions to problems I cannot solve. Because you are kind enough to be patient with a broken man learning how to love again. Will you marry me, Elena? Will you be my real wife? Elena looked at this man who had been a stranger when she first came to his castle. He was still serious and quiet and sometimes distant. He would probably never be the passionate romantic hero of her girlhood dreams, but he was good, and he was honest, and he saw her for who she really was and valued her for it. Yes, she said, I will marry you. This time, when Aldrich kissed her, it was not the cold, dutiful kiss of their wedding day. It was warm and gentle and full of promise. Spring came early that year. The snow melted, flowers began to bloom in the castle garden, and Elena and Aldrich planned their second wedding. It would be a small ceremony, just for themselves and the people of the village they had grown to love. But a few days before the wedding, a messenger arrived with news that changed everything. Elena's father was dead. The messenger brought a letter from the lawyer who had handled her father's affairs. Lord Garrett had died of a fever, probably the same fever that had struck Aldrich's village. He had left Elena a small inheritance and a message. My dear daughter, the letter said, I hope you can forgive me for the choice I made. I sold you to save our family, but I have regretted it every day since. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are free to make your own choices about your life. The Duke has honored our agreement. Your marriage contract included a clause that if you were ever widowed or if I died, you would receive a dowry large enough to support yourself independently. You do not have to stay married to a man you did not choose. You can come home or go anywhere else you want to go. The choice is yours now. Elena read the letter twice, then sat down hard in her chair. She was free. After all these months of feeling trapped, she was actually free to leave if she wanted to. Aldrich found her there an hour later, still holding the letter. What is it? He asked, seeing her expression. Elena handed him the letter and watched his face as he read it. When he finished, he was very quiet. So, he said finally, you can leave. Yes, Elena said. Do you want to? Elena looked at her husband, this man who had bought her for a horse and then slowly, carefully learned to value her for herself. This man who had worked beside her to save his people's lives. This man who had offered her a marriage based on respect and partnership rather than passion, and somehow made that seem like enough. No, she said. I do not want to leave. Are you sure? Aldrich asked. You could go anywhere. Find a man who would love you the way you deserve to be loved. Have the life you should have had. This is the life I want to have, Elena said. Here with you. Aldrich's face relaxed into a smile. Even though I will never love you the way I loved Isabel? Even though, Elena said. What we have is different, but it is ours. And it is real. And it is enough. On a warm spring morning, Elena and Aldrich were married for the second time in the village church, with all their friends and neighbors watching. Elena wore a simple white dress that she had chosen herself, and Aldrich wore his best clothes but not the cold, distant expression he had worn at their first wedding. This time, when they said their vows, they meant every word. This time, when they kissed, it was because they wanted to. And this time, when the ceremony was over, Elena knew she was exactly where she belonged. 1 year after their second wedding, Elena stood in the castle garden watching Aldrich teach sword fighting to a group of young men from the village. It was a warm summer day, and she could hear laughter mixed with the sound of metal hitting metal. This was something new Aldrich had started, teaching the village boys how to defend themselves and their families. Elena had suggested it after hearing about bandits on the roads leading to other towns. The boys need to know how to protect their homes, she had said, and it would be good for them to have something to do during the slow farming season. Aldrich had agreed immediately. He seemed to enjoy teaching the young men, and they clearly looked up to him with respect and admiration. Elena smiled as she watched 12-year-old Tom Patterson try to copy Aldrich's movements with a wooden practice sword. Tom was the baby who had nearly died from the fever. Now he was healthy and strong and determined to become a fighter like the Duke. "Not so fast, Tom," Aldrich called out. "Good sword work is about control, not speed. Watch." Aldrich moved his sword slowly through the air, showing the boys the proper form. Even moving slowly, he looked dangerous and graceful at the same time. Elena felt a warm glow of pride watching her husband. Over the past year, he had changed so much from the cold, distant man who had bought her for a horse. He was still serious and quiet, but now his seriousness came from caring about people, instead of from trying to protect himself from caring. "My lady," Elena turned to see Sarah approaching with a basket in her hands. "Mrs. Blackwood asked me to bring you these," Sarah said, holding out the basket. Inside were letters, 3 of them, all sealed with wax and addressed to Elena in different handwriting. Elena had been getting more letters lately. Word had somehow spread about the work she and Aldrich had done during the fever, and other ladies from nearby estates had begun writing to ask for advice about helping their own people. Elena opened the first letter. It was from Lady Margaret Thornfield, whose estate was about 50 miles to the south. "Dear Duchess Elena," the letter began, "I have heard about the wonderful work you did caring for your village during the fever outbreak. We are facing a similar problem here, not fever but hunger. The crops failed this year and many families are struggling to feed their children. Could you advise me on the best ways to help them? I have money to buy food, but I am not sure how to distribute it fairly or how to make sure it goes to the families who need it most." Elena smiled as she read. This was exactly the kind of problem she had learned to solve over the past year. She knew Lady Thornfield could send food directly to the village leaders, but it would be better to also send people to check on the families personally and make sure the children were getting enough to eat. The second letter was from Lady Anne Westbrook, asking for advice about starting a school for village children. The third was from Lady Catherine Mills, who wanted to know how to convince her husband to let her work directly with their tenant families instead of just sending servants with supplies. Elena had never expected to become someone that other people asked for advice, but she discovered she enjoyed it. Each letter was a puzzle to solve, a way to help people she had never met but who faced the same problems she had learned to handle. "Good news?" Sarah asked, seeing Elena smile. "Very good news," Elena said. "People who want to help their villages just like we do here. You will write back to them?" "Of course. And I think I will invite some of these ladies to visit us here. They could see how we do things and maybe we could learn from them too." Elena had been thinking about this idea for weeks. What if the ladies who cared about helping their people could work together? What if they could share ideas and resources and help each other solve problems? "Aldrich!" Elena called out as the sword practice ended and the boys began putting away their equipment. He came over to her, sweating a little from the exercise but smiling. "How did the lesson go?" Elena asked. "Very well. Tom is getting much better, and young John Hartwell has real talent with a sword. In a few years he will be good enough to join my guard if he wants to." Elena felt proud hearing this. John was the oldest son of the family they had helped during the fever. The fact that Aldrich thought the boy was good enough to serve in the castle guard showed how much respect he had developed for the village people. "I have something to show you," Elena said, handing him the letters. Aldrich read them carefully, his expression growing more interested with each one. "You are becoming famous," he said when he finished. "Not famous, just useful." "Very useful," Aldrich agreed. "What do you want to do about this?" Elena took a deep breath. "I want to invite these ladies here for a visit. I want to show them what we have learned about helping people, and I want to learn from them about problems we have not faced yet." "That sounds like a good idea," Aldrich said. "When would you want to do this?" "Soon. Maybe in a month when the harvest is finished and people have more time to travel." Aldrich nodded. "We will need to prepare rooms for guests and plan meals. It has been a long time since we entertained visitors at the castle. Elena felt a flutter of nervousness. She had never hosted important guests before, but she was also excited about the idea of bringing together women who cared about the same things she cared about. "Will you help me plan it?" she asked. "Of course," Aldrich said. "This is important work you are doing, Elena. I am proud of you." Elena felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. Aldrich was not a man who said things he did not mean, so when he told her he was proud, she knew he really meant it. That evening they sat together in Aldrich's study planning the visit. They made lists of which rooms to prepare, what food to serve, and how to show their guests the village and the work they did there. "We should take them to meet the families we helped during the fever," Elena said. "And show them the new workshops you built for the men who cannot do heavy farm work. And the school you started for the village children," Aldrich added. Elena smiled. The school had been her idea, but Aldrich had supported it completely. They had hired a teacher from the nearest town and built a small building, where children could learn to read and write and do arithmetic. It was only open a few hours each day so the children could still help with farm work, but it was making a real difference. "I never thought I would enjoy having guests," Aldrich said, "but I find myself looking forward to this." "Really?" Elena was surprised. Aldrich had always seemed to prefer the quiet, private life they had built together. "I want other people to see what we have accomplished here," Aldrich said. "I want them to see how wonderful you are." Elena felt her cheeks get warm. Even after a year of marriage, Aldrich's compliments still made her feel shy and happy. "And I want you to see that you are not the only lady who cares about these things," Aldrich continued. "I think you will enjoy having friends who understand your work." Elena realized he was right. She loved her life with Aldrich, but sometimes she missed having other women to talk to about things that interested her. Sarah was sweet, but she was too young and too worried about saying the wrong thing to be a real friend. And Mrs. Blackwood, while more efficient than ever, was still not someone Elena could talk to about her ideas and dreams. The visit took place in October, when the leaves were turning gold and red and the air was crisp but not yet cold. Lady Margaret Thornfield arrived first, a woman about Elena's age with intelligent brown eyes and a practical manner. Lady Anne Westbrook came next, older and more serious but with a warm smile. Lady Catherine Mills was the youngest, barely 20, with blonde hair and an enthusiasm that reminded Elena of herself when she had first started working in the village. Elena was nervous about meeting these women. What if they were disappointed by what she had to show them? What if they thought her ideas were foolish or naive? But her worries disappeared almost immediately. The three ladies were genuinely interested in everything Elena showed them. They asked thoughtful questions, offered useful suggestions, and shared stories about their own efforts to help their people. "I never thought about having the village women help choose which families need food most," Lady Margaret said, after Elena explained how they had distributed supplies during the fever. "I have been trying to decide that myself, but of course the village women would know better than I would. And this idea of teaching skills to people who cannot do their old jobs," Lady Anne said, watching one of the men Aldrich had trained working as a carpenter. "That is brilliant. We have several men on our estate who have been hurt and cannot farm anymore. They could learn carpentry or blacksmithing instead." Lady Catherine was most interested in the children's school. "My husband says education is wasted on peasant children," she said. "But you have proof that it works. These children can read and write better than some noble children I know." "Education is never wasted," Elena said firmly. "Smart children become smart adults, and smart adults find better ways to solve problems." "I am going to use that argument with my husband," Lady Catherine said with a grin. The three ladies stayed for a week, and Elena enjoyed every minute of it. She had forgotten how good it felt to have female friends, women she could talk to about everything from serious matters like village management to lighter things like books and fashion, and the small frustrations of daily life. They also spent time with Aldrich, who impressed them all with his knowledge and his obvious respect for Elena's work. "You are very lucky," Lady Margaret told Elena privately. "Most husbands would not support their wives doing this kind of work." "I know," Elena said. "It took time for us to understand each other, but now I cannot imagine being married to anyone else." This was true. Elena's feelings for Aldrich had grown slowly over the year, like a plant that gets a little bigger each day until suddenly you realize it has become something beautiful. She loved his quiet strength, his dry humor, his complete honesty about everything. She loved the way he listened to her ideas and took them seriously. She loved watching him with the village children, patient and kind but never talking down to them. It was not the wild, passionate love she had read about in stories, but it was real and steady, and it made her happy every day. When the ladies left, they promised to stay in touch and to visit again the following year. Elena felt sad to see them go, but also excited about continuing their correspondence and learning about their progress with their own projects. That went very well, Aldrich said as they waved goodbye to the last carriage. Better than I hoped, Elena agreed. I think we all learned useful things from each other. And you looked happy, Aldrich said. Happier than I have seen you look in a long time. Elena thought about this. I was happy. It felt good to share our work with people who understood why it matters, and it felt good to have friends again. Good, Aldrich said. You should have friends. You should have everything that makes you happy.